About a year ago, we were having a strategic planning meeting at the commission office during a board meeting, and the group was talking about this group that was doing these pruning classes online and how most of the board members have actually been trying to watch these videos in Italian, trying to figure out what they've been saying and understand the processes and stuff. And that conversation kind of morphed into, well, maybe we should try to have these guys come out and actually teach us their philosophies and how they design, how they want us to prune the vineyards. So after that meeting, we went out after getting a grant and a couple other things. We reached out to Simonit and Sirch to bring them to our region to teach them their method of pruning. Yes, and the commission became the first regional organization to partner with Simonit and Sirch as the Vine Master Pruners class came to Lake County. The class launched last November and wrapped up about 2 weeks ago with their last suckering class. We're eager to share with you a little bit about the class and in the implementation of the Lake County vineyards. Obviously, as always, Jacopo and Jett will be answering questions after after them speaking. So let's go and get started and bring them up here, and thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Well, so my name is Jacopo Miolo. Here I have my workmate, Jett Johansson. And we work for, don't worry, everyone is going to mispronounce this name, is Simonit and Sirch, but it's not a problem. So we had the first edition of the Lake County Pruning School. So what we did during this Lake County Pruning School, well, we had, of course, online courses as they mentioned before, but what we did and what we like to do so much is, next please, is 2 days during the winter, 1 day during the spring of tutoring. What does it mean? That is a time, is a moment for all the viticulturists of the Lake County to work together, sharing and learning a pruning method based on 30 years of experience, okay? But it's not just about learning, but it's also, please next, a work as a team. So we like to think about the pruning and also about this pruning school like a team activity that we can do all together. Anyway, what is the Simonit and Sirch pruning method, and what does it mean? So, Simonit and Sirch pruning method started, let's say, more than 30 years ago from an idea of Marco Simonit and Pierpaolo Sirch. That what they did, they started to look at the vines and what was going on at that time. So we are speaking about the 90s, more or less, in Italy. And what they started to see is, and to think about, is the pruning consequence inside the structure of a vine. Next, please. So, what do we have inside the trunk? And if everyone here knows how is done a vine, right? We have a trunk, and after, if we speak about a cordon, we have 2 arms with the position. If we speak about a cane, we have trunk with 2 canes or more canes. It depends how much grapes do you want to produce. Anyway, what they started to think about, okay, what is going on inside? Because we can see what is going on outside, looking about how is growing the canopy. We can know how it's going with the fertilization and all this kind of stuff, studying the soil. Here we are just the geologists that explain us many things. But no one before these 2 guys thought about, okay, what is going on inside the trunk? What they did? Well, at that time, they cut off some vine from the vineyard, and they brought the vines to a carpenter, and they made cross-section of the vines. And what they discovered is, next please.
These are those actual vines.
Yeah. So what they started to see is, okay, now we did this cross-section, what we can see? Let's try to do this together. Well, inside the vine, what we can see is that we have part of the wood that has this white color and part of the wood that has this brown, blackish color, okay? And they figured out that this white wood and this darker wood is nothing more than live wood and dead wood. And what they noticed is that also the dead wood was always where there were any kind of wind. So as we can see, for example, on the first plant there, we have our trunk, we have the head, this is a single guyot, and on the top of the head, what we can see, all this pruning wood that was made in the past, because over here we go to prune the vine here by here. Inside what they found that where there are all these pruning woods, inside there is a lot of dead wood. Where usually on the trunk, where usually we do not have any pruning wound because we shoot thin or we sucker during the growing season, that part of the plant, we have a lot of white wood. So there they understand, okay, so this dead wood is coming from the pruning, from the wounds, okay? So, and they gave a name to this, and is, please next. They called desiccation cones. Is it a disease? No, not at all. It's the natural way that the plant has to close its wounds, okay? So it's not a disease. Simply, easily, we have to think about the trunk as a water pipe, okay? Of course, not just one, but many all together. What happens? Every time that we remove a part of the vine with the pruning, the plant needs to close the water pipes that were bringing water up to that part. And how the plant does this? Creating these desiccation cones. What they see also, what they saw at the time, is that this one was more frequent, so all this concentration of wounds was more frequent in the newer vineyards than not in the older vineyards. Why? Different labors.
Anyone have a clue?
Yeah, they do not have a clue. But after what they started to do is to travel around Europe, and what they saw that in the oldest vineyards that we have in Europe, so south of Italy, Spain, Portugal, the training system and the idea behind the pruning was completely different.
Than
So-
in the modern one.
Sorry, what?
Than in the modern vineyard.
That and the modern viticulture. So, but let's try to figure it out to make an example here in the United States. Do you know Lodi? Yeah? You know that is one of the biggest AVA here in the United States, if not maybe the bigger, but anyway. And there are one of the oldest vineyards that we have here in the United States, 120 years old. What is the training system there? It's not Guyot or cane, it's not cordon, but it's head-trained vine. Another difference is the spacing between the vines. So at that time, when they planted that vineyards, the space between the vines were 8 feet by 10, 10 by 10, so really wide space. In the modern viticulture, how is? It's different. First one, we have wires, posts, we have the rows, we have geometries in our vineyards. Space between the rows, space between the vines, that is, every year is always, it seems that there is a kind of competition. I planted 3 by 3, I planted 2 by 2. So it seems, it's the only moment when, you try to be shorter than not.
Yeah.
Anyway, of course, this change in the vineyard brought changing also in the pruning method. Because of course, if in a head-trained vine we have a lot of space to make the plant develop, okay, to grow in the space, in the modern viticulture we do not have all this space. Or better, we have many mind limits saying, oh, I can't go over the wire. I can't grow too much with my position because if not, I'm gonna lose canopy. Is it this right? Yeah, more or less.
We have more limitations in
So-
modern viticulture.
Their question was why we have vineyards that are 80 years old, 100 years old, that are still there, still producing a good amount of grapes, and with the modern viticulture or the technology, tractors, chemicals, knowledge, we have to pull out vineyards after 20 years, or 15 or 25, depends, where you are, how is the climate. Well, they figured out something. Next slide, please. Next again. And here we can say that was the spark that make everything happen. Next. They understood one thing, that the vine is a creeper. So it's not like a tree, it's a plant that likes to grow in the space, to climb the
extend.
trees, extend. It's not a plant that likes to stay in one place. So in the past, our, grandfathers were able to handle this nature of the vine, doing what? Next, please. Try to simulate what was going on in the nature artificially. So this is an example of a vineyard that is more than 100 years old in south of Italy.
Maybe
Huh?
it's 500 years old or something like that.
I don't know, I do not remember. We have to ask them.
This one, very, very old.
Yeah, for sure older than us. Anyway, as we can see, what is the structure of the vine? It's similar to what we saw before, no? The only difference, they changed it. There are not anymore trees, there are just these wood posts. But what were doing our grandfathers was more or less what they saw in the nature. In different ways. Next slide, please. Head trade vines is the most natural way to manage a vineyard. Do we have wires here? Post? Nothing. There isn't any geometrical limit. So what their idea was, okay, what we can do to take this idea and apply this to the two most used training system in the world. So cordon and cane or guyot. Next slide. Oh, this is another, it's really nice. Isn't it? It's beautiful. Switzerland?
Probably Switzerland.
Yeah. Next, please. So, the question was, okay, we have these vines that are 120 years old. Why they are so old? Because in some way the workers, our grandfathers, let the plant create this structure. What do we have in a head trade vine? We have the trunk, we have an head, and after from this head we can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 branches, arms that are growing like an octopus. The question was, okay, so we understand that if we let the plant grow a little bit here by here as we can do on the head train vines, the plant is able to live for longer. It's also in a healthier way than not as what they were seeing at that time. But what we can do to bring this idea from a head train vine to the cordon and to the cane system? Well, here they started to think, well, we have to create a method of work. The method that is called Simonit and Sirch pruning method. So next, please. The first rule, the Simonit and Sirch pruning method, and we wrote also books about this, is based on 4 easy rules. Not easy, simple rules. Simple, okay? So the first one is controlled branching. What does it mean? What we do on a head train vine? Here by here, with our spurs, we grow, we let this position create this arm. Okay, what can I do with for example, here we have an example of a double cane. Okay, I can't create 6, 7 arms. What I can do, I can develop 2 arms. So I have my trunk and my 2 arms. That here by here they go to grow in this way. Oh, in the draw is beautiful. Is it possible in the reality? Next slide. Yes, it is.
The drawing's a copy of the picture.
Yep. So, as we can see here, we have an example of that is totally different of what we saw before. Before we were looking at a trunk with a head full of wounds, and that is. Here we have a trunk that is always the main structure of the vine, but from this trunk, we have these 2 arms that are growing outside, where we are able, here by here, to grow a little bit. Why is it so important to grow for the vine? Because as I said, it's a creeper. So it needs to grow to increase its amount of livelihood inside. Next, we can do this one in different ways. I want to have 2 arms. I can do with 2 arms. I can do also with one single cane, just with 1 arm. Next. Same thing about the cordon. Of course, here we are not speaking about canes, but here by here, what we can do is to rise a little bit my position. How much we are speaking? 1 finger? Less than a half inch?
This picture is from
Yeah.
this picture is from our campus in northern Italy, where they have been experimenting with this method since they started doing those cross sections of the plant. So this is the result of 30 years of application of the Simonit and Sirch method.
Of course, when they started, they did some mistake. It's normal. They were trying to create this method. So usually here the people ask to us, but if I grow so much, if I raise so much my position, I'm going to lose canopy. Well, you can edge the vine a little bit higher. It's not a big deal. But what we can see here, look at the evenness growth of the canes, of the shoots, sorry. Anyway, next slide. So the first rule of our method is controlled branching. So let the plant grow in the space how we want, but always with the idea to increase the amount of livelihood. Second rule is, Jett?
To respect the vascular flow of the plants, which is the way the sap runs through the main structure of the plant until it reaches the shoots that then are, that's what produces our grapes and the leaves and everything that we need on the plant. So of course, we need that vascular flow of the plant to be as healthy and intact as possible.
Why this is so important? What is at the end the trunk of the vine? Is the connection between the roots and the canopy. If the connection is working well, my canopy will be healthy and I can get a good crop from it. If my connection is not working, I can start to see some, struggle, like short shoots, dead positions.
Loss of vigor.
Yeah. So, pick next, please. Next again. So here we have an example. So the second rule is based, as we said, on the respecting of the vascular flow. Here we have an example. This is a Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux.
And it's not a plant. It's not a plant that we work with. It's just
yeah. This is
out of pure chance. This is the way they've been working the plant, right?
So they do by themselves. They develop these 2 arms. But on one side, what we have is on the left side we have an arm where we were able to left all the pruning wounds on the top part of the arm. In the right side, is it right? Yes. We have the pruning wounds. Yeah, we were able to create this arm, but we have these pruning wounds more or less everywhere.
They cross each other, right?
Exactly. So, next slide, please. what we can see. Okay, let's start from the left. On the left, now we know the difference between live wood and dead wood, right? Perfect. On the left, we can see that from the base of the trunk to the end of the arm, we have a kind of highway there. No? We have a kind of,
Uninterrupted road.
an
Yeah.
uninterrupted road that connected the roots with the cane on that side. The other side, what we can see? Well, on the trunk, we have the road, but after we have some accident. We started to have some traffic around.
Potholes.
Pajos, yeah, some crazy guy. So it's really important to try to create on a vine, and we need to be careful about this, a preferential way, an uninterrupted way for the sap to reach the canopy. So here is, of course, clear. In the left side, we did it. On the right side, we don't. We didn't. No, we did it. We didn't.
On the left side, we did it, and on the right side, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, please. Here we have another example. This is a winery that we have been worked together. As you can see, is a Chardonnay planted in 1993. And at the beginning was pruned in the we call traditional way. So the idea to keep the vine always there with the lopper. So
Here it says head pruning, but in Europe that's what we call it. But it's when we prune the vine like what's it called, willow. We cut everything off and we take one shoot every year.
But about these details, you can find more information in the books. Anyway, here, as you can see, what we did, we converted this vine from the traditional pruning to the Simonit and Sirch pruning method. So we found a preferential, an uninterrupted way to create our harm. So what does it mean? This that also if we prune in a traditional way in the past, what is always possible to learn. So and this one was the goal this year of the Lake County Pruning School. Try to learn something different. Try something different because especially in the wine industry, there is always something to learn. Next, please. Oh, this is another example. This is the first vineyard that Marco Simonit started to work in Italy. So at the beginning was a head pruning vine, so with many wounds on the head, and after he developed these two arms. This is a 45-year-old vineyard that is still there, is still producing. You can understand also speaking about, money and investment. If I'm able to keep my vineyard as long as I can, better it is, because I can split my initial investment for a longer period, and I can get also more money back. Next. So the third rule is more technical, of course. So anytime that we are going to prune a sucker or a shoot, we have to be careful to reduce, in the best way possible, the size of the wound that I'm going to create. So we have to be careful to make small wounds. So when we're going to cut a 1-year-old wound, so it could be a sucker, could be a shoot, what we have to do. Next, please. Here we are going really technical, so stay with us. What we have to do, before we need to start to understand what is the morphology of the vine. So here we have just a zoom of shoot, is that reddish part, where we have our scissor. At the base of every shoot, we have what we call the basal buds, or the crown buds. Someone calls basal buds, someone calls crown buds. Why we have to be careful? Because when we go to cut a shoot like this, we need always to leave these basal buds. And now we're going to explain you why. Next, please. So here we have a cross-section of shoot.
This one is a live plant, though.
Yeah.
It's not dry like the other ones we saw.
So here we have the shoot. Here we have could be the trunk, could be the head, could be the cane, doesn't matter. So what we can see, next slide please. At the base we have the base buds. Next slide. If you're going to make, too much, a little bit less, little bit, okay, next, next, next.
There we
Stay
are.
there, thank you. So, when we are going to make, when we are going to prune the vine and we're going to remove this shoot, it's important to keep the base buds. If we are able to keep these base buds, what happened? Next slide, please. Of course, we create a wound, so the plant is going to create a desiccation cone. Natural reaction of the vine, it's not a disease, okay? But, no. Go ahead. Yeah, stay there. Okay, perfect. Stay there. One more? Okay.
There we go.
So the fact that we left there the base buds, so the base bud, what they do, usually? They call the sap. So we have something that is working, that is still alive there, that it is continuing to call the sap, and is able to keep the desiccation cone smaller and just located in that area. But what happens if we don't keep, if we don't keep the base buds? Next, please. Yeah, safflo, bello. Next. Next. Base buds, we know where are. Okay, perfect. Next. Okay, so what happens if we go to remove? So we go to make a really clean cat. No? Really clean, no base buds. We do not want to have suckers during the spring. Not too much.
Well,
so
we
much
won't
work.
have any suckers if we remove them.
Of
That's
course.
one of the things that'll
So
happen.
this is one of the traditions, no? What they say to us, you know, at school or the first day that we work in the vineyard, if you're going to, if you see something on the trunk during the winter, go and make a really clean cut. So no base buds, nothing.
Smooth.
Yeah.
Could even sand it off with some sandpaper, get it really nice and smooth.
And someone did it. Next. So of course, first thing, the size of the fund will be bigger. So the desiccation cone too. Bigger is the wound, bigger is the desiccation cone. It's a natural reaction. Next, of course, we do not have any more bud that is continuing to call the sap. So that part is going to die completely. Is it this true? Next. Next. The only way, because we are not doctors, so what we like to do is to try the things, see if it's true, okay, it works. After we speak also with the professors that help us to convalidate this. Here is an example of a trial that we did in Italy. So in a young vineyards, we left all the suckers, and on the left side, we remove all the suckers, keeping the base buds. On the right side, we took out, we make smooth and clean cuts to remove the base buds. What is the difference that we can see? First one, start is always from the left. The desiccation cone, the black spot is small and located just there. But what we can see that the live wound was able to close that wound, so that part is healed.
It's protected from water, from
Disease,
disease.
trunk diseases.
It's closed in there.
Right side, what we have is the side where we left always, you know, we made always clean cut. What we can see, first one, the desiccation cone is bigger. Second thing, is not just located in that area. We can see that that black stripes are continuing to going down. Because of course the plant is continuing to try to keep this desiccation cone there. Next, last but not least, protective wood, or we call it spare wood, usually with the guys in the vineyards. What does it mean? Of course, there are sometimes we need to cut and to remove some part that is a little bit older than 1 year. So if we speak about cane, could be 2 years. If we can speak about a trunk, could be who knows how much.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes,
Could we
please.
recap the 3 rules that we went through, what they're
Or
called?
do you want to ask to them?
Yeah. Is there anyone here that could recap the first 3 principles that we talked about for
Nah, maybe.
using the pruning method.
No,
That's fine.
they are shy, you know. It
Yeah.
happens. So the first rule we said, now this is the fourth. The first rule is controlled branching. Second rule is respecting the vascular flow. Third rule is small wounds, or small cuts, as you watch. The last one, but not the least, is protective wound, or spur wound. Why is it so important? Because we understood every time that we make a wound, we create a desiccation cone. Bigger is the wound, bigger is the desiccation cone. So when we go to cut a wound that is a little bit older than 1 year, could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years, of course the size of the wound increased a lot. So what we do, next slide, as we can see here, we need to remove that cane. We are doing quite a big wound, not so much, but it's biggish.
It's bigger, yeah.
What we do, we are not going to make this wound, to make this cut close to our vascular system or our highway, let's call it this way, but we're going always to keep this, you know, amount of spur wood that helps, you know, to keep further the desiccation cone from my main road.
It's like a fire. You
Fire
know,
defense.
in the forest, you can dig trenches, or you can make a fire. You can clear some forest to
Yep.
keep the fire from spreading, right?
Yep. So, next. Whenever you want. And we made also research about this. Now, I'm not going to be too deep on this. But what we discovered is that if we are going to make the wounds keeping this amount of spur wood or not, there is a big change. If we're going to make these wounds without any spur wood, of course the desiccation cone is directly there. And it goes deeper inside than not if we keep amount of spur wood. Next. So, really, really interesting, beautiful, the 4 rules, but our goal at the end is to try to recover that knowledge that we lost in some way from the people that were you know, managing the vines as a head-trained vines, and applying this idea to the modern viticulture, on, of course, on the cane, but also, next slide, on the cordon. Trying to follow a little bit more what is the nature of the vine, and try to follow a little bit less what we think about geometry. Okay? Because the goal is, if I can keep my vine for a long time, what I can do is better grapes, better wine, but also grapes for a longer time.
Cut down on investment costs.
Okay? So, next. Well, as I said, we wrote books about this, blah, 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 that's explained, but in a better way for sure.
Oh, they're very detailed.
Really detailed, yeah, but they're not too boring, don't worry. What does it mean, the pruning method, how to apply this, but this is just an educational tool that we developed. What our goal is try to share our knowledge with the people. Okay, for this year with the Lake County Wine Grape Commission, we started this program. So, and yeah, it's the first one in the United States. And I hope that it will not be the last one.
No, we're going to make sure that we'll do schools in other parts of California, at least for now.
Because what we think, and that is really important, is that also the people, you know, there is a lot of knowledge in winemaking, in viticulture, in, you know, geology, but there is a lack of knowledge and training, especially for the people that work every day in the vineyards. So, the Mexican
To make
guys,
that connection between the knowledge that's there, it's available, and the people applying the knowledge in the work situation.
exactly. That at the end are these people that are handling our vineyards or your vineyards. Are these people that are, you know, deciding if your vineyards will stay, your vine will stay there for a long time or for a short time. So the program that we developed with the Lake County has this goal to train the people and to think in a different way that can help also the Lake County wine region. Okay? Anyway, next, I don't think, well, we have different Guyot, Cordon. Any question? No.
Well, we also have the online tool.
Yeah, but we can speak about this another time.
All right.
So, if there aren't any questions,
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the sucker cut, small sucker cut, looking at the sucker cut versus the big cut, and you said it closed the wound on its own, how long did it take for that wound to close?
To close.
this is a good question. So, it depends on how we did that cut, okay? So if we did that cut on, keeping the base buds, speaking of 1 year old shoot, it takes 1 year to close, 1-2 years. Depends also in the vigor of the vine and how much energy it has the vine. More vigor we have in a vine, more is able to handle all the stress that we create.
And it'll grow quicker.
Yeah. If we don't keep the base buds, usually that wound will never close. We will always see this, spot.
Some old farmers say, the vine remembers.
Always. Yeah, this is the interesting thing about this work, now working with the vines, especially with the pruning. Whatever we do now is something that we can see on the vine after 20 years. It's like, a book, a diary. Other questions? Did I answer to your question? You're welcome. There is another one here.
Yes.
It looked like at first when you were showing the cuts that you were making the cuts to where the arm itself was creeping out. But then later in the photos, it looked like that was a different type of pruning, and you were still laying down a cane and then letting the spurs develop. So were those two different types of pruning? 'Cause at first I thought you were making cuts to make the arm expand, but then later I saw a young vine that looked like you did just lay down the cane and then applied your principles to the spurs.
Oh, yeah, you're speaking about different training system. Yeah, the first one that we saw was a long pruning, what we call long pruning. So there are two different kind of pruning in the world, short pruning and the long pruning. On the long pruning, we have always a cane, so a long shoot that we left during the winter that carries the production of the year. Short pruning are all that training system where we are working just with spurs, so with a short part of a shoot with 2-3 buds, depends how long we are going to leave these spurs, that carries our production. Okay, so speaking about the short pruning, we can have different kind of training system. We can have cordon, double cordon, California sprouting, head trim vines. Speaking about the long pruning, we can have Guyot, double Guyot, quad cane, double arch, blah, blah, blah. There are many ways. But mainly there are two different kind of pruning, long pruning and short pruning. Other questions? Nope.
They could also be mixed.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, well, yeah, but
No,
step by
like
step.
if you have a cane and a spur.
Yeah, but if we say to them that there is some training system to make, 15 tons per acre. Okay, so, yeah.
Maybe you can mention something about as far as changing the vigor versus how many visible buds you leave. So if you have a big difference in your growth on your vine, if you have really short shoots versus really long shoots, how you can balance that by your pruning method.
I would like to add something before that. why is a problem to have a long shoot and a shorter shoot? What is the question? What is the problem behind this? What? The lady said? Huh? Harvesting? Could be that one too. But mainly, let's focus on the grapes. So if we have a long shoot, if we have a position or a shoot that is healthy, that is able to grow a lot, to be really tall, of course this shoot is also able to carry a lot of grapes, at least 2 clusters, and quite big. Depends on the variety, of course. Sometimes also 3 if we speak Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc too. If we have a short shoot, it means that it is a weak shoot.
Less leaves.
Less leaves, the clusters are smaller. Maybe the amount is always the same. Could be we can have always 3 clusters. But one thing is to have 1 cluster like this. Another thing is to have 1 cluster like this. Speaking also about this. What is possible to do to balance this? We just finished 2 weeks ago the shoot thinning, the suckering.
Yeah.
And there, but I'll let us explain this to Jett. What we did, Jett, during the shoot thinning.
Well, to understand what we did during the shoot thinning, we have to understand what we did during the pruning as well.
Ah, that's true.
Just very quickly, we looked at the plants and we decided to, through our pruning, also leave a message to the shoot thinning crew, which in this case are ourselves, that we came back after the pruning school in the springtime, where if we saw that that position of the plant was strong, it was growing and pushing strongly, we'd leave a longer spur. So we'd cut that shoot, we'd cut it, leaving it a little bit longer, so you can clearly see, okay, this one is strong. And where the plant was growing weaker, it was showing signs of weakness, you know, short shoots, not many leaves, very thin shoots, we'd leave a shorter spur so that whoever's coming along their suckering will see, all right, this is where the plant is strong, this is where the plant is weak, this is a strong plant, this is a weak plant. And they could see that, because when you're suckering, it's not easy to understand the vigor of the plant, while when you're pruning, it's quite a lot easier.
So we have to think about the pruning. We said this before, a plant never forget, okay? So we have to figure it out that it's like a story that every pruning and every spring we're going to write. So what we did during the pruning is a consequence of what we did during the previous season. What we are doing, what we did 2 weeks ago during the suckering is a consequence of what we did during the last pruning. This harvest, it will be a consequence of what we did during the suckering and during the shoot and during the pruning.
So what did we do during the suckering there? On the positions that we deemed strong, we would leave more shoots. In this case, in the school, we left 2 shoots where the positions were strong, where we left a longer spur. And in the positions that we deemed weak, where there was a shorter spur, we left 1 shoot. And this way we can balance the vigor of the plants.